Welcome to Sunday School Live. I'm just going to give everybody a wee second to gather around and get all the materials they need ready. So let's just make sure this is working. Let me see. Oh, everyone's starting to gather in. Great. Let's see, this is working. Yeah. So we've had another week of quarantine or self-isolating, as people call it. So hope you're all doing okay. Everyone's staying safe and well, and you're not too bored. I know it's the start of the Easter holidays, even though we feel like we've been off school for so long. But I just want to welcome everyone to Sunday School Live, whether you've been here all 3 weeks or you've been here, this is your first time. You're so welcome, especially those from who aren't from Aghadowey. You're so welcome to join us. It's great to have you. Sunday School isn't always from my living room. Normally it's just about 20 or so of us in the church hall, but we've had to move it online because we can't obviously gather together. So just make sure you've got all your worksheets that you need. I'm going to explain a little bit about the teens sheets a little later on, but there is worksheets for teenagers like Year 8 plus to join in, because activities and story is quite geared to primary school kids, but there's still lots that we can learn from it. If you've got older brothers or older sisters who are watching or maybe out in another room, so yeah, make sure you get those downloaded as well, and they'll help you through it. So for primary school, we've got our little tree that you have here, and also the little snake craft too. So, yes, for teenagers, we have these this week, and this is just a little Bible study for you to help navigate this passage. It's quite a difficult passage in places, and it's basically, you've got the whole Bible passage in the middle and you've got some notes around the outside just to help you navigate your way through it and get something from it. And then there's also a little question page as well. Like, don't need to fill out all the boxes, don't need to feel like you have to write anything at all. Just have a look at the questions, think to yourself what you would put down for the answers, whether you want to write them down or just talk with other siblings, or just want to do them yourself. Just adapt it to whatever stage you're at and whatever you're happy doing. But yeah, so I just noticed it cut off the last few verses of Genesis chapter 3. It's quite a long passage compared to some others, but you'll find the rest of it in the Bible. But yeah, it's the last couple of verses anyway. Okay, so teens, have a go at those. It'd be great to get some feedback from those, if you've tried them, if you haven't tried them, whether you thought the design was too girly. That was my main concern last night. But yeah, feedback would be great for those teen worksheets too. So we have been starting a new series last week. It was the Bible in 4 colours, and we were looking at how we can summarize the entire Bible in just 4 colours, because there's lots and lots of stories in the Bible and some of them get a bit confusing in places, and I wanted to make it as easy as possible for children, even the little young ones, to understand the key concepts of the Bible, how they can talk about those in 4 different colours. So last week our colour was green, and we looked at how God made the most perfect world, and he filled it with lots of animals and lots of nature, and he created Adam and Eve. And this week our colour is black, where we see how this world that God made is no longer perfect because of one mistake that Adam and Eve did. Next week our colours are going to be red and white, as we look at the Easter story and how God has a plan throughout the entire Bible to take away our sin. So that's the plan. and hopefully you'll join us next week as well. So we've got 42 families joining in. That's really great. You can comment underneath where you're watching from. It's always interesting to know how far and wide these videos go. Last week our video got over 1,000 views, which is just so incredible, and that so many people are wanting to watch and join in with Sunday School Live. So the little craft, I didn't explain it or list the materials exactly, but it has like all the materials that you need on it. If you don't have like brown card, or if you don't have, I mean you're always going to have toilet roll tubes, you can use like a lollipop stick or something like that. If you don't have any red tissue paper, you can just draw on the apples or draw on the fruits and colour them in like that. We won't be doing all the activities together, but it just gives you something to do maybe after Sunday School Live, or this afternoon, or sometime during the week. Okay, so let's start our story. Our story comes from the Jesus Storybook Bible. So if you have one of these at home, it'd be great for you to grab it now, and you can follow along with the pictures and see for yourself all the illustrations that show the story about Adam and Eve. This story is all about a terrible lie. Sometimes we say little lies, and sometimes we think we can get away with it. Well, this story tells about Adam and Eve making a lie, and they didn't get away with it. So remember last week, Adam and Eve lived happily together in a beautiful new home, and everything was perfect. But for a while, until the day when everything went wrong. God had a horrible enemy. His name was Satan. Satan had once been the most beautiful angel, but he didn't want to be just an angel. He wanted to be more than that. He wanted to be God. He grew proud and evil and full of hate, and God had sent him out of heaven. Satan was seething with anger and looking for a way to hurt God. He wanted to stop God's plan, stop this love story right there. So he disguised himself as a snake and waited in the garden. Now, God had given Adam and Eve only one rule. Don't eat the fruit on that tree, God told them, because if you do, you'll think you'll know everything. You'll stop trusting me, and then death and sadness and tears will come. They had one rule. They could have anything they wanted in the Garden of Eden, and they had one rule, one thing they weren't allowed to do. Yet they had this entire garden filled with lots of lovely things. But there was just one thing they weren't allowed. See, God knew if they ate the fruit, they would think they didn't need him, and they would try to make themselves happy without him. But God knew there was no such thing as happiness without him, and life without him wouldn't be life at all. As soon as the snake saw his chance, he slithered silently up to Eve. Does God really love you? The serpent whispered. If he does, why won't he let you eat from this nice, juicy, delicious fruit? Per you, perhaps God doesn't want you to be happy. The snake's word hissed into his ears and sunk down deep into her heart like poison. Does God love me? Eve wondered. Suddenly she didn't know anymore. Just trust me, the serpent whispered. You don't need God. One small taste, that's all, and you'll be happier than you could ever imagine. Eve picked up the fruit and ate some, and Adam ate some too. And terrible lie came into the world. It would never leave. It would live on every human heart, whispering to every one of God's children, God doesn't love me. And it wasn't a dream, and it was a nightmare. A dove flew from Adam's hand. A deer darted into the thicket. It was as if they were frightened by something. A chill was in the air. Something strange was happening. They'd always been naked, but now they felt naked. and wrong, and they didn't want anyone to see them. So they hid. Later that evening, as God was talking and walking with his children, he shouted out, "Children!" Usually, Adam and Eve loved to hear God's voice and would run to him as fast as they could. But this time, they ran away and hid in the shadows. "Where are you?" God called. "Hiding," Adam said. "We're afraid of you." "Did you eat the fruit I told you not to eat?" God asked them. Adam said, "Eve made me do it." "What have you done?" God asked. Eve said, "The serpent made me do it." And the terrible pain came into God's heart. His children hadn't just broken one rule, they had broken God's heart and made him very sad. They had broken their wonderful relationship with him, and now he knew everything else would be ruined. God's creation would start to unravel and come undone and go wrong. From now on, everything was sad, even though it was supposed to last forever and be happy. You see, this thing called sin had come into God's perfect world, and it would never leave. God's children would always be running away from him and hiding in the dark. Their hearts would break now, never properly healed again. God couldn't let his children live forever, not in such pain, not without him. There was only one way to protect them. "You'll have to leave the garden now," God told his children, his eyes filling with tears. "This is no longer your true home. It's not the place for you anymore." But before they left the garden, God made clothes for his children to cover them. He clothed them and sent them away along on a long, long journey, out of their garden and out of their home. Well, in another story, it would be all over, and that would have been the end. But not this story. God loved his children too much to let the story end there. Even though he knew he would suffer, God had a plan, a magnificent dream. One day he would get his children back. One day he would make the world their perfect home again. And one day he would wipe away every tear and every piece of sadness in their lives. You see, no matter what, in spite of everything, God would love his children with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And they would forget him. And though they would forget him and run for him, deep in their hearts, God's children would miss him and long for him. Lost children yearning for their home. Before they left the garden, God whispered a promise to Adam and Eve. "It will not always be this sad. I will come to rescue you. And when I do, I'm going to do battle against the snake. I'll get rid of the sin and dark and sadness you let into this world. I'm coming back to fix this." And he would, one day, God himself would come. And we get to discover what that happy ending is next week at Sunday School Live in the next part of our story. So, I sometimes think this part of the story is a little bit like some of my favourite Disney films. Entangled, in Frozen, and even in my other favourite films, Narnia, there's always an evil person wanting to come up with a cunning plan to make everyone unhappy, to take away everyone's happiness. But there's always a happy ending, isn't there? There's always someone who comes to the rescue and helps me have a happily ever after. And we get to find out what that happily ever after is next week. So, if you want to get your crafts, you can make the tree where the fruit was that Eve ate. And this tree has a big long name. It's a tree of good and evil. And this is the tree that Eve ate from. The one tree they were not allowed to eat from. So you see, you've got the tree and you've got the little stop sign. to show that yes, this was a beautiful tree with lots of delicious fruit, but there was a stop sign and no entry sign. They were not supposed to eat this tree. So that's just a wee fun craft that you can do to help remember about the story of the tree. Then you've also got the snake. I've got it upside down. The spiral snake. You've got the slithery snake that deceived Eve. And it's best to colour this in first, and then you cut out along the lines and you get a slithery snake. Now, if you've got colouring pencils, that's great, you colour it in. But if you've got some other craft materials like paint or glitter or like felt pieces, you can really go to town and make this a really colourful snake, just like in the picture in the storybook, like this one, you see? So you can design the snake yourself. Go be really creative and give a really colourful design. So yeah, colour in first and then you can cut it out. And then maybe for some of our younger ones, or even our older ones who like colouring in, I mean, I like colouring in, it's quite therapeutic. We've got a little colouring in sheet with Adam and Eve and this tree that looked so beautiful and so delicious, but there was a stop and no entry sign that they were not supposed to eat from. So those are just some crafts that you can get along doing this afternoon, or maybe after Sunday School Live. I know sometimes parents, you might think, well, what's the point of doing a craft, or it's a craft to fill some time and to end up in the bin afterwards. For the children that are really creative learners and learn by doing and by action, this is a great way for them to process the story and learn the story rather than listening, because sometimes kids zone out after like 30 seconds and they miss some parts of the story. So doing crafts is a really good way of just another way of learning the story and taking it in and spending some time thinking about the apples on the tree and how they weren't supposed to eat the fruit. So there is reasoning behind all the craft and the glitter and the colouring in, and it's not something just to throw in the bin afterwards, but something that they can actually really learn from. And while you're doing the crafts, this is a really good chance for you to talk to your children about the story, about anything they maybe didn't understand, or something that if they've got questions, it's a really good opportunity for them to answer the questions. And it just gives it a really good space and time for you to talk about the story in a really creative way for those creative learners in your family. So now it's time for the quiz. If you haven't been with us before, we do a little interactive online quiz. So you need to get an extra device. Sorry, I should have reminded you earlier. A mobile phone is perfect, or a tablet. Try keep watching the story or the live stream here. But if we grab another device and you just type into Google joinmyquiz.com. And I'm going to try and do it along with you today because I'm not filming from my phone. So just joinmyquiz.com. You don't need to sign up or anything. You don't need to download an app. And then you click enter a game code like so. And I will give you the game code now. I'm just fixing the settings here. Okay, there's a timer for each question. I have a leaderboard so I can see, and let's do host game. So it's just loading now. Okay, so the enter game code is 784518. So I'll just write that in the comments. 784518. So 784518. Just double check. 784518. Okay, so we've got ones joining up already. That's great. And the code is in the comments if you need it. And I'm going to join in too. So the game code is 784518. And we'll just give everyone a wee chance to get their device and get logged in. We've got 36 people joined in so far. So some of the questions, I think the first two relate back to next week, just to sort of keep building on the knowledge and the facts that we're learning. So there we go. Okay, so we've got 44 people joining in. I'll give everyone a wee second. Okay. Okay, so everybody ready? Okay, let's play. Okay. Oh, what was the colour for last week's story? So if you think back to last week, okay, green. So how did God describe the Garden of Eden and everything in it before Adam and Eve sinned? Now, was it bad, nearly perfect, average, or perfect? There we go. So some of you are flying on ahead. That's great. Who did Satan want to be? Who did he want to be? Okay. How did Satan disguise himself? What was this thing that he was doing? Who did he try to be? What was the one thing Adam and Eve were not allowed to eat? So they had everything in the Garden of Eden and they weren't allowed to eat one thing. Who ate from the tree of good and evil first? Okay. So how did Satan deceive or trick Eve? Okay. So you can have two answers for this one. Okay. What is sin? Things we do that God doesn't like, or things we say that God doesn't like? It's both. You need to think of both of them. When God spoke to Adam and Eve after they sinned, what did they do? What did they do? Okay. And what colour represents our story today? Okay. Very good. Is everyone nearly finished? Very good. Everyone's nearly there. Just someone catching up. There we go. So I think everyone is nearly finished. Well done, everyone, on the quiz. So I think it does tell you what rank you come in. So very good. Well done. So hope you enjoyed that little quiz. They're just a really good way of just reflecting back on the story and seeing what we remember from the story of Adam and Eve. So let's go back to our story, if I can find my little notes. So as I was saying in the story, every good fairy tale or every good Disney film has somebody plotting an evil plan. Like Frozen and Tangled and Narnia, those are some of my favourite films. And in each of those, somebody is coming up with an evil plan to destroy everyone's happiness, to get something that they think that they deserve. In this story, the evil one planning an evil plan is Satan. But this story isn't a fairy tale. This story is true. And we see how Satan had an evil plan to cause Adam and Eve to make some big mistakes. And they made 3 big mistakes. They didn't obey God. That's number one. They didn't obey God. They didn't listen to him. He gave them the entire Garden of Eden to enjoy, but just told them, just don't go near this one tree, don't go near it. It's a bit like if you were to go into the supermarket and you had all the food in the supermarket, all that you could ever want or need, and they were like, give you a trolley and as much money as you wanted, and you could go and get anything you wanted except for this one thing. That's a bit like this. They had everything they needed apart from this one thing that they were not allowed to get. They didn't obey God. They didn't listen to him. He gave them everything they needed, but they still didn't listen. And when they realized what they had done wrong, they ran away from God. They knew they had done something wrong. They knew they hadn't listened. It's a bit like one time I broke one of my granny's ornaments. And what I tried to do was I tried to put it back on top, the head of this thing, tried to put it back on top. I tried to cover it up and make sure that Granny didn't notice. And I left the living room to make it seem that I hadn't done anything wrong and it was my sister or somebody else who had broken the ornament. And a few weeks later, Granny noticed that this ornament just wasn't the same as it was. And there was a little crack in it. She looked at the crack and she poked at it and the head fell off. And then she realised what had happened. I tried to cover up my mistake. I tried to hide it. I tried to run away from it. Adam and Eve did the exact same. They ran away from God. They tried to hide it. They tried to cover it up. And then God questioned them about it. And they started blaming each other. Adam blamed Eve and then Eve blamed the snake. They didn't take up their own consequences. They didn't own their own mistakes. They didn't tell the truth. They didn't confess their sin. They blamed each other for their own mistakes. So God had to do something. They were no longer deserving of this beautiful garden. They didn't deserve to be with all the good things God had given them. So he said they needed to leave. They needed time out of the Garden of Eden. They needed to leave. Sin entered the world and it was never the same again from Adam and Eve's big mistake. It was never to be the same. This is a little bit like a crisp, clean page that I lifted out this morning. It's a perfect page. There's no marks on it. There's no creases on it. That was a bit like the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve. They were perfect. So I'm going to try and I'm going to scrunch it all up really tight into a ball. Okay? Now unravel it. Is it longer? Is it still crisp and clean? Is it still without mistakes? No. I try and smooth it out as much as I can. You can still see the creases. I'm still trying to smooth it out. Oh dear, we can still see it's not the same as it was before, and it would never be the same again. I cannot make this a nice crisp page like it used to be. You see the difference? I can't fix this. And this is the same for our sin and the sin that Adam and Eve, they couldn't fix it. Only God can. And that's what we're going to find out next week. How God had a big plan to help fix this very big mess and this very big mistake for Adam and Eve. But we might not have trees in our life that we're not supposed to eat from. And what we might be thinking, what is sin? What are all the things I cannot do? Well, sinning is basically anything that you do or say that God doesn't like. So what is sin? Sin is things that you do or say that God doesn't like. And that's it. And in the Bible, we find out more about God, who God wants us to be like. And we can grow and we can become better at trying to be the best that we can be for Jesus. And that sometimes is really hard, and we will always make mistakes. We are not perfect, but we are so thankful that we have a God who created a perfect world and sent Jesus to make it perfect again. So that's our lesson for this week. Our colour for this week was black. This sad colour. Whenever you look at black or things that are dirty, they're a dark colour. It's a sad colour. Whenever we think of yellow, we think of happiness, and black is kind of like a sad colour. And this is a really sad story. And it doesn't seem like there's much hope in this story, or that there's ever going to be a happily ever after. But next week, we get to find out what the happily ever after is. So green was last week. We had a perfect world where everything was great. This week, we had black, and there was sadness, and Adam and Eve sinned for the first time. And next week, we get to find out what the colours red and white get to mean. So I hope you enjoyed Sunday School Live this week. I hope you have fun doing the activities. Just remember about the little prayer activity that you can do each week with the little prayer links that you do. Parents, this is a great opportunity to pray over these kind of things with kids in a really natural way. We can talk about the story again, and children can pray about sin and what sin is, and maybe about sin in their lives, because we all think our children are perfect, but we all have sin in our lives. So this is just a great way to just talk about it and pray about it in a really natural way, especially after the story. And this afternoon is a special time of prayer where all the churches are coming together, and I'm going to post some more activities about it later in the afternoon on the Aghadowey Facebook page, and it's just a great really encourage you to join in on that. We also have our sermon on the podcast on our website that you'll be able to find from Knox Jones, our minister, so you'll be able to learn from God's word in that way, as if we were in church and having our usual sermon. So joining in that, you'll find that on our website. And that's really all the announcements I have. I hope you have a good Sunday, a good weekend, and a good week. I hope you enjoyed the story and took something from it. Teens, I would love to know your feedback about this, about the wee Bible study notes for you and the little questions. So if you have any feedback about those, that would be great. I'm going to post a little song in the comments in just a wee moment, but I hope you really enjoyed Sunday School Live today. So yeah, remember to check out the sermon on the website, and I hope you have a really good week. Bye-bye.